Hey, welcome back to my channel. I just got done showing my son yesterday the 2002 Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man. And it was kind of cool going back and watching that movie. He really liked it a lot, and we watched the second one today, which I'll do a review on that later this week. Now, when this movie came out, this was a big deal. Sony was throwing $139 million at this movie, which was unheard of back then. I mean, now that's a drop in the bucket for some of these superhero movies, but back then it was a big deal. Up to that point, Batman had already run its course because Joel Schumacher ran it into the ground with Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, which, oh my God, make a whole review. It'd be an hour-long review on that movie, how terrible that movie is. And then we had the Blade trilogy. The first Blade came out in '97 and went into the early 2000s. And that was a semi-successful. The first two movies were successful. The third one, not so much. But comic book movies weren't the trend back then. So this was a gamble by Sony, putting $139 million in this movie, and especially hiring Sam Raimi. Now, I love Sam Raimi just as much as any other horror fan, and he's done a lot of cool films, but this isn't a movie you would have thought they would have gave to Sam Raimi. But he is a big comic book fan. They say that he has over 25,000 comic books in his collection. So he knows his stuff, and now there's word that he's going to possibly direct Doctor Strange 2, and with them saying they're going to incorporate horror elements into the movie, there's nobody better than Sam Raimi to do that film, honestly, especially with his style. I mean, Sam Raimi has a very distinctive style that you know is his when it comes to movie making, with the crazy shots he pulls off. And you get to see some of that in this movie, which is cool. Going back and it's the first time I've watched this movie in a while, and I always loved it. It's just been a long time since I've seen it. And honestly, watching it again, well, we'll get into that. I'm going to compare it to the newer movies, which I do like. But going back and watching this one really makes me miss Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Sam Raimi behind the camera. I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia. I don't know. But watching it with my son again really made me realize how really good the first movie was. And we watched the second one this morning, and the second one's considered one of the best comic book movies of all time. And that one still holds up pretty goddamn well. But anyway, as we all know, they hired Tobey Maguire to play Peter Parker, Kristen Dunst to play Mary Jane Watson, James Franco to play Harry Osborn, Willem Dafoe to play Norman Osborn, Cliff Robertson playing Uncle Ben, Rosemary Harris to play Aunt May, and then we got the great J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, and we also have Randy Savage in this movie as Bonesaw. And if you're a WWF fan, you know who Randy Savage is. Everybody should know who that is. And the great Bruce Campbell makes a cameo as the announcer at the wrestling match, who names Spider-Man in the movie. Now, this movie starts off with Peter, as we all know. I never read the comic book, so I'm just going off what I knew, but the movie starts off with Peter, and he's a crush on Mary Jane, who lives right next door to him. And he's the geeky kid who gets made fun of a lot. And he's kind of wimpy and not very athletic and all this stuff. And his best friend's Harry Osborn, who we come to find out through a conversation between him and his dad, who he got kicked out of a very private school, so now he's going to public school, and he kind of becomes Peter's best friend. And they go on this trip to the Science Museum, and they go into the research area, and Peter's taking pictures for the school newspaper, and he gets bit by a genetically enhanced spider. Well, we all know what's going to happen. He goes home and he doesn't feel good. He wakes up the next day and he doesn't need glasses anymore. He's muscular, stronger than ever. And he goes to school, and there's a scene where Mary Jane's walking by and slips on some juice that's on the floor, and her food on the tray goes flying up in the air. Peter puts his arm around her and catches the tray in one hand and catches all the stuff on the tray. Now, looking through some research, my son loves that scene. He laughed pretty hard when that happened. They didn't use any CGI for that scene. Tobey Maguire actually did it for real, and they did it with using a sticky substance on the bottom of everything and on the tray. So when his hand was underneath it, it's actually stuck to his hand, and he caught everything. It took a lot of takes, but they got that without no trickery. He actually did it, except for putting the sticky substance on everything. And he has an encounter with Flash Thompson, and he kind of kicks his butt. And he kind of realizes that he can climb up walls and jump really far and shoot these webs out of his wrists. And with this new power, Uncle Ben says to him in the movie, it was a great line, with great power comes great responsibility. And he wants to get a car now. He's feeling confident because he wants to take Mary Jane out. And he realizes he can win $3,000 if he wrestles in this thing where if you last 3 minutes in the ring with Bonesaw, you can win $3,000. So he makes a It's kind of a crappy, like sweatpants outfit of a cheap version of Spider-Man outfit. And this is when we see Bruce Campbell and he names him Spider-Man, and he beats Bonesaw, but the promoter stiffs him on the 3,000, only gives him 100. And when Peter's walking out, the guy gets robbed, and the guy's running by him. The guy robbed the promoter, and Peter lets him go to kind of get revenge on him. And as we know, he regrets that a few minutes later when he finds out that the guy went out and carjacked Uncle Ben and shot him. And Uncle Ben pretty much dies in Peter's arms. And this is pretty much the catalyst for Peter to become Spider-Man and fight crime. And from here on out, we see Peter stopping different robberies and all kinds of stuff. And in the meantime, Norman Osborn, who owns Oscorp, has a government contract, and he's testing out military weapons for this, they want this human enhancement thing and this exoskeleton and the glider, as we all know. And he's worried that he's going to lose the contract, so he goes ahead and he tests it on himself. And he was warned by one of his people that work for him that it can cause insanity. Well, it doesn't take long for Norman to start going insane, and he kills people, starts killing people as the Green Goblin. But he keeps it hidden from his son and everybody else. They don't know it first. And eventually, the Green Goblin and Spider-Man have some run-ins with each other, and they fight. And they still don't know who each other are until Thanksgiving, when right before they show up for dinner, they had a battle, and Peter has a cut in his arm. And when they're sitting at the table, Norman realizes that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And this sets up our final battle between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. And Spider-Man prevails and takes Norman back to his house because he doesn't want Harry to know that his dad was the Green Goblin, and he sets him down on his chair. And Harry catches him, dressed as Spider-Man, and thinks Spider-Man killed his dad, which comes in later on in the series. A little bit of animosity in part 2, and as we know in part 3, Harry becomes the new Green Goblin and tries to kill Spider-Man. But in the first movie, we don't know that yet because we're still developing story. Watching the movie again after all this time, I forgot how really, really well done this movie is. And Sam Raimi's style really lends itself to Spider-Man. I mean, in the first movie, he has his patented crazy camera shots, but not as much as part 2. There's definitely more of that Evil Dead-ish style that he honed over years of doing horror films and lower budgeted films. The movie looks beautiful. Tobey Maguire, I forgot how good he was as Spider-Man. That's how long it's been since I watched this. Kristen Dunst is really good as Mary Jane Watson, too. James Franco's good in it. Willem Dafoe, no duh, he's awesome as the Green Goblin. And you see Willem Dafoe, and sometimes you think he's crazy automatically, but he really plays the normal at first, and then you can see him slipping into insanity and his thirst for blood. He really does a really good job. And honestly, watching this again, now part 2 is the best one out of the original 3, but this one's really well done, and it sets up the universe we're going to play in for 3 movies that Sam Raimi had. And unfortunately, they were going to make a 4th one with Sam Raimi, and it fell apart, which was probably a good thing, because after what Sony did to him with part 3, which I like part 3, but there's a lot of problems there, and a lot of it was caused by the studio. I mean, people wanted to point fingers at Sam Raimi, but let's be honest, the studio forced him to do things that they should have let him alone. After what he did with the first 2, they should just let him go and do whatever he wanted, but they extended their will, and we got what we got. I would give the first Spider-Man a 9 out of 10. It's that good. Now, 2 is better, so obviously I give 2 a higher rating, which I'll get into a review later this week on part 2. But it's really good, and watching it again, I mean, I like Tom Holland as Spider-Man. I didn't like the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I thought they were total crap. There's some actors in those movies that I like, but in those movies they're terrible. Terrible. The directing's awful. The effects look like crap. I just don't like them. And in this movie, the 2002 Spider-Man, there are some effects that don't look as convincing now, but you got to remember, it was 2002, and back then it looked incredible. We're comparing them through 2020 eyes. But I would say I like Peter Parker. I like Tobey Maguire better than Tom Holland, which I never thought I'd say. I thought Tom Holland was the best Spider-Man, but watching the movies again, the first 2, it makes me miss Tobey Maguire and Sam Raimi behind the camera. Those movies were better directed. The action was better. I don't mind saying that. I like the Amazing Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, although I like Homecoming better than Far From Home, honestly. I watched Far From Home, and I like the actors in it, but there's something missing from that movie. I don't know what it is. The action's kind of lackluster. I don't know. I have to watch it again, but watching the first one, the 2002 one, I like it better than the newer ones. I really do. Maybe it was Sam Raimi's directing, but it makes me miss those movies, honestly. And it's fun to go back and rewatch them. But yeah, that's it for Spider-Man. I give it a 9 out of 10. It's amazing how well it held up, and I really enjoyed watching it again. And I'm glad my son enjoyed them. So, well, all we gotta do is watch part 3 now, and I know that's the one that people like the least. But I always had fun with that movie. It's definitely not the best one out of the 3. But yeah, it's fun going back and watching with my son. So that's it for me for Spider-Man. Have a great day, and I'll be back soon with Spider-Man 2. Thanks.